I hope I see 80.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing some real significant changes right now. I mean, I think before you get to 80, I mean, maybe just, in the next 5 to 7 years.
It's true.
One of those supply chain problems that we're up against right now is with the semiconductors. Now, people, okay, you hear that term, what do you think of?
I think of Back to the Future.
Okay, and let me give you a big corporate name that you might see if you were Wall Street, if you're watching the stock market. Okay, Intel Semiconductor Corporation, right?
Oh, yeah.
AMD.
Talk about thermal efficiency.
Okay, so these are chip manufacturers, right? Semiconductors,
right?
Silicon based. Usually, okay, most of the time they're in your computers, smartphones, tablets, but they're also in
transmissions. They're all over. They're in a lot of components, electronic components on your vehicle, your onboard system, your computer, everything.
So Doc Brown's DeLorean was not the only, contrary to popular thinking, the only car with a semiconductor. If you want to go flux capacitor, essentially that was a it was a Gen 1, okay? But
yeah, right.
So there's computer chips in today's cars all over the place.
Oh.
And the more, we got Jeep talking about their 4xe, the more of this kind of, thermal efficiency talk and, controlling the engine output to get it to keep it from getting too hot. That's all computer regulated, okay? So now we have a situation where there's a real shortage with this stuff.
Big time. To the point to where we've had multiple plants shut down, not only production plants for Chrysler's 3 minivans, or Stellantis, if you will. They've had to furlough people because of it, because they don't have the components to assemble, complete assembly. You've got plants that are using these chips in specific components that will get shipped to those plants that are assembling those vehicles in Canada and up in Detroit and those areas that are also affected, that have had to close because of shortages. It's a big deal. And you just hit on it, Keith. It's not just the automotive side of it, but it has impacted the automotive industry now more than ever has it before. And that's what people need to take a hard look at on this, and what the future of auto manufacturing is going to consist of, and how it's going to continue to move forward in such instances where we may have pandemic type shortages like this. This is a global shortage created by, number one, the usage of the type of component over multiple types of products, and the pandemic.
Okay, and I'm hearing the word and seeing the word floated around, crisis, when we're talking about these chip shortages. And they're saying it's not going away anytime soon.
Nope.
I'll give you an example. Foxconn, who makes they're a chipset manufacturer, okay? I think they're in Taiwan or China, I'm not sure, but they're somewhere in Asia. Apple has used them for a long time. There's PC manufacturers that use them. All right. So they have a factory in Wisconsin here in the United States. Fisker, who we've talked about before, if you're not familiar with Fisker, they were kind of an early adopter to the whole EV thing. They had a car way back that they put solar panels on the roof, and they're still in startup mode. They've been in business, out of business. It's a cool concept. They just announced earlier this year that they were coming out with a crossover.
You, sir, for those of you, you can go to partscounterguru.com. Keith wrote a nice little piece up there on the Fisker, didn't you?
Yeah. They were very forward thinking. Before Tesla was cool, they were doing it. They're back in the game. They're in. It looks like it's going to be some interesting stuff. So they just announced a partnership with Foxconn, Fisker
Right.
and Foxconn. Okay,
Right.
and this is gonna be for that second model that we talked about earlier in the year. That I think is going to be it's going to be kind of a crossover type body style, and this is the interesting part. Is that the deal that Fisker announced is Foxconn's actually going to make the vehicles. And they're going to roll out a US-based vehicle assembly factory run by Foxconn. Now, how much does that tell you about how many semiconductors are in these automobiles?
Right.
That
right.
a company like Foxconn, who make motherboards in your computer, is going to literally put the car. Yeah.
And speaking of that, okay, so we've got a lot of things that's going to tie into this. Okay, now the reason we have a shortage, related to pandemic and a number of other things, but there have been Brazil is shutting down all of their plants, their Ford plants. Ford in Brazil is shutting down all their plants,
and it's not because it's not economy driven in the sense that it's not because they're not selling vehicles, right?
Right. Well, their sales were off. They do continue. They say they will continue to keep the Troller plant, which basically is the, parent of the
Ranger.
the Ford Bronco Sport. Really, I think if you look at that thing, it really looks like the Ford. It's like the Brazilian version of the new Ford Bronco.
So it's a Brazilian Bronco.
It is a Brazilian Bronco. It's hairless.
Woo! Okay.
Oh.
All right.
So, but this.
I'm sorry. Did I just completely
no? You didn't.
Okay.
But what I want to grab back on that train, which is that this is Ford's way, really, too. And they've come out and said it. Was it Jim Farley, the new CEO of Ford, has basically said that it's part of their bigger plan to become more lean and an efficient auto manufacturer. Okay. And how does this tie into this? Well, here's how this ties into this. How can you become a more lean and efficient auto manufacturer when you still have to sell vehicles down there, when logistically it makes sense to have a plant there? What you do is you automate, okay? With automation comes the use of computer chips, semiconductors, all these things. If you think we have a chip problem now, just wait until we get 10 years down the road. So this has to be addressed now, and we're really seeing the effects of it. And as a matter of fact, it's gotten as high up as the new United States administration. Semiconductor executive Tom Caulfield, he knew that there was a crisis brewing, and he started getting a lot of calls from some of the big automakers just before the Christmas holidays. Basically, the chief executive chip maker of Global Foundries is who he is the CEO of, recalls the auto executive saying Ford, Volkswagen, BMW, Daimler-Benz, Fiat Chrysler, which is obviously now Stellantis, GM, every one of them have become his best friend. For a lot of reasons, because they need these semiconductors, man.
You have 5G cellular pushing that also. They're making more chips for those. That's everybody and their brother has now gotten in line to put electronic components in their products.
Well, the shortage is, bottom line, on the automotive industry side, it's forced GM and Ford to slash production in 3 states in the U.S. here, as well as in Canada and Mexico. It threatens some jobs, actually, at those companies and some of those suppliers. Supposedly, the current administration has leaned on big chip producers and their host nations, including Taiwan, to increase output. But on Friday, governors from 8 states urged President Biden to redouble those efforts, warning of a growing list of automakers and suppliers and dealers negatively affected by the shortage.
What can you do, though? I mean, because you can't make these companies ramp up their production if they are already at capacity. I mean, that costs money. They have to build more facilities. That takes time. I mean, how do you, I mean, if you're operating at near 100% capacity already, you can't get blood from a rock. I mean, what's the solution here?
Right. I don't know. Maybe we should start making some chips.
Yeah, well.
And I ain't talking about Tim's Cascade chips or
right.
Frito-Lay or anybody like that. Look, semiconductors, man, they are the brains behind a lot of products. And that's how important this is. And we're talking vacuum cleaners, refrigerators, computers, space shuttles.
Everything, man.
The average automobile, man.
Jay, check this out. I read yesterday, and I want to know if you've heard this. The processor components in the new Perseverance rover, new to me.
Yeah.
Okay. It's running on, I want to say it was a late 90s model iMac-based processing platform.
Isn't that crazy?
It is. Yeah.
But that just goes to show you that there is some really good technology that dates way back.
I mean, like, not just the vacuum brand that you mentioned, but the robotic vacuums, the Roombas, all those smart devices that you've got in your house now with speakers in them and all your doorbell cameras and on and on and on, man. I mean, we are everything.
Yeah, I mean, when you get into a vehicle and, probably the first thing you do these days, I know most people do, is you sync your phone to your car. Okay, that takes an effort by the onboard system to do that. You roll or you hit the button for your power window to go down, or your power moonroof or sunroof to go back, or airbags to deploy when you get in an accident. All of these things, man. It's just I don't think people understand how big of a deal this really is, and that's why it has caught the administration's attention, Congress, really act on this and get these people together. We need to get. This is almost like it's not a.
It's a crisis. They use the word crisis.
They use the word crisis. You're absolutely right.
We reported on this. We had Ford and Google announcing a partnership just recently.
Like 2 podcasts ago. Pad ties ago. Pad ties sounds good.
Right. I mean, do you think that's not going to... I mean, it's going to be a factor.
Oh, for sure it's going to be a factor. And, the answer is obviously that you got to have more manufacturers get into the chip manufacturing game, but that's going to be a problem, and that's the worry that I have right now, Keith. And I said this to you early on before we came on, that my take on this is because they're going to have to go from auto manufacturers are going to have to go from their primary source to second tier source or third tier source or even a fourth tier source, because they need to get the supply to keep production going to put these vehicles out. And then what happens
when you run into a safety issue or a recall issue, or a standardization issue, because you've got a control component that could potentially have you got to pull the VIN to see whose version of the component they were using.
Well,
and you got 5 different parts that
Right. Well, luckily in our world, Keith, as you well know, we have preached this to everyone about understanding what your vehicle identification number does for you. It is the DNA of your vehicle. And in situations like this where there is a recall for a very short window, and we're going to get into one here before we end the day, but you can narrow that down. I mean, right to the day and the hour that vehicle was produced. Thank goodness we have a really robust SPC system in place, or statistical process controls in place, that when something happens, we can go right back to that. You can even go back to the person that was on shift that night and find out what was going on. I mean, that's pretty important, and that's how intense this can get. So when you hear of a recall, it is those resources that the auto manufacturers have pulled from to get a more direct call out to those individuals that are owning those vehicles. This is a big deal. It's a bigger deal right now than I think most of us realize at this point. And I think the residual effects are going to be felt way deep into the summer from this. And it's going to impact other, all these manufacturers that have made a lot of promises, like Ford on the Bronco, getting it out, being able to deliver it. And look at how much issue, GM has had with the Corvette, or the continuous delays of, say, the Cybertruck, or, all of these things getting delayed. These are reasons for this happening.